سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Alhamdulillah, we begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity for us to continue in our lesson in the commentary of the Aqaid of Al-Imam Nasafiyyah. And we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless our lesson and bless us with the understanding, and may Allah bless our hearts with iman and taqwa, and protect us from all difficulties, trials and tribulations in dunya and akhirah. Ameen ya rabbal alameen. So inshallah, we will enter into our book. So in our last lesson, we have come into the topic where Al-Imam An-Nasafiyyah speaks about the contingency of the universe, and he mentioned that the universe, everything that is within the contents of the universe is contingent. So as what we see in our book, and he said bijami'i ajza'ihi, and al-alam, we spoke about the meaning of al-alam. Al-alam is anything that is beside Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the meaning of the definition of al-alam. So he said al-alamu bi jami'i ajza'ihi, with all of its parts, min as-samawati wa ma fiha wal ardi wa ma alayha, whether we are speaking about the skies or the earth. So basically the universe as a whole, muhdathun, this is the khabar muhdath, basically it means is contingent. And contingent, Al-Imam At-Taftazani, and he mentioned after that, he said ay mukhrajun min al-adami ila al-wujud. So this is a very important definition that I repeat many times in my classes, and I hope those who are following this class and have done some revision, especially what we have covered from the Aqaid Sanusiyyah, Aqidah Sanusiyyah, in our last class. So it will be useful for those who are following to have a bit of read up on Aqidah Sanusiyyah on this concept of the contingency of the universe. So basically, when we say something that is muhdath, something that is hadith or muhdath, it basically same meaning. So it is something that is brought into existence from non-existence. This is the meaning. And he said mukhrajun min al-adami ila al-wujud. So basically, he's saying the universe, all of the universe and all of its contents, it is what you call it, contingent. So we have covered basically this paragraph that we see on the screen. So basically, he explained about what is the meaning of contingency, and what is the difference between the Muslims and the philosophers with regard to the contingency of the universe, because some philosophers believe that the universe is not contingent, and they believe in qidamun naw, they believe that the universe, what you call it, is pre-eternal, with the pre-eternality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these are some of the things that we have covered in our last lesson. So then he mentioned about the evidence behind the contingency of the universe. So after he mentioned that the universe is contingent, muhdath, so he says summa ashara ila dalili huduth al-alam. Al-Imam Tatazin mentioned, Al-Imam Nasafiyyah speaks about the evidence behind the contingency of the universe. What is the evidence? And he said that either huwa al-alam a'yanun wa a'rad. He mentioned that the universe consists of a'yan wa a'rad, and also I mentioned this also last week. We mentioned that every content of this universe is divided into two parts, and we have the substance and we have the accident. And I mentioned there is some fault in the translation. Later on, we go back into the other translation, and we find it better explain about this. So basically, you see the word a'yan wa a'rad, a'yan wa a'rad. So this is where basically we stop in our last lesson. When we say a'yan, and it is a substance. A'yan is a substance. A'rad, and it is the accident. And I gave the example of a cup. And if you remember last week, I gave the example of a cup, and I mentioned that the cup is a substance, and the color of the cup is an accident. So the color is something that does not stand on its own. Colors, whether it is red or white or black, it is something that does not stand on its own. So when we say something that does not stand on its own, and we use the term an accident, we use the term an accident. Whereas for substance, it is something that stand on its own. What is the meaning of stand on its own? So this lesson, inshallah ta'ala, we will explain in greater detail. We will find Imam Taftazani will mention further the difference between a substance and an accident. So this is going to be today's lesson. We are going to find out about those differences. So to understand what is a substance is easy. Yeah, when we say something it is substance, we can see many examples around us, and even for ourselves, and we are a substance, correct or not? We are a substance, and our skin color is an accident. So our skin color is subsists within our bodies, and that is a substance. So the skin color does not stand on its own. So it always subsists within the substance. So now when we go on, and inshallah, all this we have covered also, and you see this paragraph. You can refer to the recording, and all this I've mentioned. So today's lesson, we will start from here, inshallah. Let me see, yeah. Okay. So this is, I believe, this is where we stop. Okay. So now you see how Al-Imam Taftazani now he is going to explain. Al-Imam Taftazani, he is going to explain further what is the meaning of a'yan and what is the meaning of a'rad. So a'yan is the plural of ayn, whereas a'rad is the plural of a'rad. So he said fal a'yanu ay mumkinun yakunu lahu qiyamun bidhatihi. So when we say something in a substance, it stands on its own. So qiyamun bidhatihi. What is the meaning of it standing by its own? Meaning it is not in need of another entity to subsist in. It is not in need of another entity to subsist in. So this is an example of a'yan. This is an example of a substance. So we say this is a substance, and it's standing on its own. It's standing on its own. Meaning it is not in need of another substance for it to subsist. So meaning you cannot put something in its place. So this is a substance that take up this space. So you cannot put something else in it. You cannot put something else in its place, because it is standing on its own. So this is basically what he mentioned. Later on he will give example, no issue. If you still have some difficulties in understanding, inshallah, after this everything will be clear. So he said lahu qiyamun bidhatihi biqarinatin ja'alahu min aqsamil alam. So this is when we speak about substance, it is from the categories or parts of this universe. So we mentioned this universe is divided into a'yan wa a'rad. And then he mentioned further. He said wa ma'na qiyamihi bidhatihi 'inda al-mutakallimin. So now he said that the meaning of qiyamihi bidhatihi, that is standing on its own, 'inda al-mutakallimin and scholars of kalam, it means an yatahayyaza binafsihi ghayra tabi'in tahayyuzuhu li tahayyuzi shay'in akhar. So now we say this is a substance. This is an example of ayn, something that is ayn, a substance. So he gave an example. He said an yatahayyaza binafsihi. Yatahayyaz, it takes up space by itself. So this substance it take this space. That's what I mentioned earlier. Same thing. This substance it take this space. It takes up the space. Ghayra غير تابع تحيزه لتحيز شيء آخر. يعني it does not any subsist in other يعني substances. It does not any subsist any in other substances. Type. What is any the meaning? The meaning any is like this. Now we say this is any a substance. The color of this bottle, the color of the bottle. Now the bottle, and we see this is a blue color, correct or not? This is an accident. That's what we mentioned. An accident cannot stand on its own. An accident, it does not take up space. It does not take up space. But the space that is taken up is the space of the substance. And the accident subsists within within the substance. So we say that accident cannot stand on its own. The moment if for example we were to imagine that we remove this accident or this color from this substance, then it will be in non-existence, because in reality it cannot be in existence except that there must be a substance for it to be in existence that is subsists in that substance. So here basically the author is saying this is a substance, for example, and it stand on its own, and it is taking up the space. It is taken up in the what you call it, the space, and it is not in need to subsist on something else, on or another substance. So this is basically what he meant. So here we have the concept of a substance is something that take up space. A substance. Here we are speaking about contingent beings, of course. We are not speaking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are speaking about al-alam. So the topic here we have to bear in mind the author is speaking about al-alam, and al-alam is anything that is other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it takes up space, and this is the characteristics of al-ain, the characteristics of a substance. بخلاف العرض, then he mentioned different from accident. Al-arad is accident. So example we gave the color. So he said فإن تحيزه تابع لتحيز الجوهر الذي هو موضوعه. So again we go back to this example. So when he speaks about the accident al-arad, he said that the accident the example for example of this color, the color it follows the substance. It follows the substance. So it is a substance that take up space, not the color. The color subsists within the substance. So color cannot exist without an entity. The color cannot exist without entity. That's what I mentioned many times. There is no such thing as color blue. So when we say something is blue, we are always speaking about a substance. So this is a blue bottle, a blue bottle. It subsists within this bottle. So we say it is blue bottle, but there is no such thing as blue by itself. It is always subsisting in substances. This is what we meant, and it doesn't stand on its own. It is in need of the substance to subsist. It is in need of the substance to subsist. So this is what the author is saying. فَإِنَّ تَحَيُّزَهُ تَابِعٌ لِتَحَيُّزِ الْجَوْهَرِ. Jawhar is part of a substance, the smaller part of the substance. So when we speak about accident is always subsisting in a substance. الذي هو موضوعه. The place anywhere it subsists. The place anywhere it subsists. So I hope it is clear, inshallah. أي محله الذي يقومه. So this is the mahal. We say this is the mahal. The mahal is a substance. So the color subsists within this substance. Now, so accident, there is the difference between accident and substance is that substance standing on its own, it takes up any space, whereas accident, it is in need of the substance to subsist. It's in need of the substance, so it does not stand on its own. So this is basically what it meant when we say it doesn't stand on its own, because on its own it cannot be in existence. So it is always subsisting in the substances. وَمَعْنَى وُجُودِ الْعَرَضِ فِي الْمَوْضُوعِ. Then he further explained, he said the meaning of the existence of an accident in an entity, هُوَ أَنَّ وُجُودَهُ فِي نَفْسِهِ هُوَ وُجُودُهُ فِي الْمَوْضُوعِ. That its existence is existence in its entity. The moment you remove it, and it becomes any non-existence, which in reality you cannot remove. But just need to imagine, it becomes any non-existence. It cannot any exist. Accident cannot exist by itself. Accident cannot exist any by by itself. Likewise, when we say a length and width, length and width, is there such thing as length and width? It doesn't exist any by its own, but it is always subsisting in substances. So when we say this bottle is 15 meters long. This bottle is 15 meters long and 15 centimeters any long, 5 centimeters any wide. So here we are the length and width, and it goes back to the substance. But length and width by itself, and it is non-existence. It is non-existence. Likewise, when it comes to color, as what we mentioned, by itself, it cannot exist. So here, the author is saying that it is in need of the mawdu'. It is in need of the place anywhere it subsists. Otherwise, it cannot be in existence. وَلِهَذَا يَمْتَنِعُ الْإِنْتِقَالُ عَنْهُ. So there can be no transfer of accident. So for example, if you want to remove the color blue from this bottle, it is impossible. You cannot remove, because it subsists in the substance. It cannot be separated from the substance. The color blue cannot be separated by the substance. ولهذا يمتنع الانتقال عنه بخلاف وجود الجسم في الحيز. So he said, different from the substance that exists in a particular space. لأن وجوده في نفسه أمر ووجوده في الحيز أمر آخر. So now in number one, we say, when it comes to substances, we say substances it stand by its own. It stand by its own. Tamam. So we say this is the first thing. Number two, we say it takes up any space. It takes up any space. Whereas for accident, it doesn't stand on its own, and it is in need of the substance to subsist. Then he mentioned وَلِهَذَا يُنْتَقَلُ عَنْهُ. So it can move from one place to another place. So for example, this bottle now it is here. I can move this bottle to another place. I can move this bottle to another place. So now it is taking up this particular space, and then I move the bottle to another. I move the bottle to another place. So this is the characteristics of the substance. So different from the accident. So basically, Al-Imam Taftazani is just trying to explain the difference between substance and accident. So this is some of the examples that substance take up space, substance can transfer from one place to another place, but accident cannot. Can you transfer the accident? No, you cannot transfer. You cannot move the color blue from here to here. But when it comes into the substance, yes, you can. And then he mentioned about philosophers. So it is not really important. The thing about philosophers. Philosophers has a different kind of understanding. They put into consideration even something that cannot be in existence, but as long as you can imagine, it is accepted. This is basically what the philosophers is saying. It is not really important. The author speaks about the difference between the Muslims and the scholars of Aqeedah and the philosophers. So basically, the scholars of Aqeedah, the scholars of Kalam, they mention this difference between substance and accident. But he said, وَعِنْدَ الْفَلَاسِفَةِ مَعْنَى قِيَامِ الشَّيْءِ بِذَاتِهِ اسْتِغْنَاؤُهُ عَنْ مَحَلٍ يُقَوِّمُهُ. اسْتِغْنَاؤُهُ عَنْ مَحَلٍ يُقَوِّمُهُ. The philosophers have this definition, and they say that when we say something that exists by its own, by its own, it means it is not in need of an entity to subsist in. It is not any in need any of an entity to subsist. So this is any the understanding any of the philosophers, any which is different any of course. And then he mentioned wa ma'na qiyamihi bi shay'in ikhtisasuhu bihi. So as long as any you ascribe any something to something else, they it is something that can be in existence, and even though it does not any exist any in the physical world, but as long as you can imagine any its existence, it carries any the same ruling as any substances, even though any it is a form any of accident. So basically what he's saying any that the philosophers any when they do not any differentiate any between substance any and accident any, despite that accident doesn't stand any on its own, but they mention that you can imagine any its existence even any without subsisting any in substances, then it is accepted. So this is any the viewpoint of the philosophers, but of course to us any this is something any that is any impossible, because any they say that as long as you ascribe any the characteristic of the accident, it means that it can any be in existence. So these are so many of the arguments Al-Imam Taftazani is saying any the differences any between the philosophers any and the scholars any of Kalam. As what I mentioned, any this is not any really important, but the philosophers any mention something any that is different any than the Muslims, and of course any this is something that is impossible, because not everything any that we can imagine can exist. Not everything that we can imagine can exist. So let me give you a simple example. Like when we say, for example, fatherhood. Does any fatherhood in existence any as a substance? So we say it is not. It is just an ascription. It is just a description. Correct or not? When you have any father and son, and then you use the term any fatherhood. You use the term fatherhood. So fatherhood any by itself any is not in existence. It is just an ascription, and we ascribe any fatherhood to the father, since this person has a son or a daughter. So we say that he has entered into the age of fatherhood. So it is not any substance that exists by itself, but it is something that can be understood. It is something that can be understood. But the philosophers they say that as long as you can ascribe it, there is no difference between this ascription and what you call it, the existence of something which is like a substance in the physical world. So he said they are saying basically, even though it is based on imagination, not any based on reality, but it is still something that is in existence like substances in existence. So this is what he mentions, sawa'un kana mutahayyizan kama fi sawadil jismi am la. So whether an accident, like he used he used the example of the color black, the color black that is subsisting in a substance, whether it is something that subsists within a substance, or it does not subsist. So the philosophers basically saying, as long as you can ascribe it to something else, then it carries the ruling of substances. It carries the ruling of substances. So anyway, what you call it, the philosophers basically are saying something contradictory. At the end of the day, we say what our scholars mention is based on profound knowledge. So we gave the example of color. That color doesn't stand on its own. It is something that is logical. Correct or not? Something that is logical. How can we say an accident can exist by itself? How can we say an accident can exist by itself? It is impossible. But if you imagine it, what you can imagine, but it cannot exist in the physical world. It cannot exist in the physical world. You can imagine, for example, the color is separated from this book. The color red is separated from this book. But in reality, color always subsists in substances. So it doesn't mean that you can imagine. It doesn't mean that you can imagine that an accident can exist by its own, meaning that it can be in the physical world. So it doesn't mean that any of your imagination any of your imagination, and it can be any in the physical world. So this is any the point of difference any between the scholars any of Kalam and the philosophers. So the philosophers any they do not take any into consideration whether it is a reality in the physical world or based any on imagination. So they do not give that differentiation. But our scholars any they gave that differentiation. So here any we are speaking any about al-alam. Again, we are speaking any about the universe. We are speaking any about the realities, the things that are in existence. So that is why the author any mentioned any they are divided any into substances and accident. And there are differences any between substances and accident. And as what any we mentioned, some substances stand on its own, accident doesn't stand on its own. Accidents any are subsisting any in substances, and so on and so forth. So this basically Al-Imam Taftazani any is explaining any further the meaning any of substance any and substance any and accidents. So we can take a look any at the what you call it translation. So let us any go to the translation of the new book any that I mentioned. I think last week I mentioned this, correct? Not any the new book any by Earl Edgar. Just to see yani his translation yani on what any we have covered. So now any we take a look here. So he said a substance any is that which as any possible thing has self-subsistence. Qiyam bidhatihi. Just now any I use any the word and it stand any on its own. And have self any subsistence. Context any this is referred any from their being any a part of the world. The meaning of self-subsistence any is the mutakallimin is that substance is bounded by itself. Substance any is he translated as substance any that is bounded any by itself, meaning you cannot put any something else any to replace. This is something any that stand any on its own, so I cannot put another bottle any to place this inside or to subsist any in this bottle, because now that bottle any this bottle any take up any space. Is being bounded does not follow from the fact that other thing is bounded. In contrast any to the accident, different any from the accident, in which case is being bounded follows the fact that the atom any jawhar any is bounded. Here any about any the term any jawhar. Okay, this is a substance. That's what we mentioned. A substance any is made any of atoms. So atoms any is jawhar. So we study in science that we see this bottle, but it is made up any of atoms and molecules. Correct, no? This bottle any is made up of atoms and molecules. Our scholars any goes any to speak any about even the atoms. Speak any about any the atoms. So the atom carries any the same ruling any as the substance. The atom yani carries any the same ruling as a substance. What is the difference between an atom and a substance? So an atom yani is the part yani of the substance. So the substance any comprises any of atoms and molecules. Then he mentioned for the atom is a subject al-mawdu, or the locus, which gives subsistence to the accident. So look at how when he explained it in English. He said the atom is a subject, mawdu, or the locus. What is the meaning of locus? This is locus, substance. So this is the locus, the entity. So the accident subsists, just like we mentioned the color blue. The accident subsists in this substance. So this is what he said, which gives any subsistence any to the accident. The meaning of the existence any of the accident in the subject is that its very existence is the existence any in the subject. So meaning you cannot remove the accident any from the substance. What happens when you remove? It becomes non-existent. It becomes non-existent. So it is in need any of the substance. Accident any is in need any of the substance. For that reason, it cannot be transferred from the subject, and you cannot remove it. This is in contrast to the existence of a body within a boundary. A boundary and that take up space. For its very existence and its existence in a boundary are two different things. So we say this is a substance that stands on its own, and it takes up any space, and meaning you cannot put something else in its place. You cannot put something else in its place. So number one, we say that it does not in need of another entity to subsist. And point number two, it takes up the space. It takes up the space where no other entity can take its place. So these are two different things. That's what he mentioned. Then he speaks about what you call it, the philosophers, which is different. And as I mentioned, do not worry any much about what any philosophers is saying. They have some contradicting views pertaining to this. So now when we continue, inshallah, you can read what he mentioned. I gave the PDF inside the group, okay? So now when we go on, now we go back to Al-Imam An-Nasafi. So now we have in bracket وَهُوَ أي ما له قيام بذاته من العالم. So now Al-Imam An-Nasafi is going to speak about Al-A'yan. Al-A'yan. So he said that when comes to substances, ما له قيام بذاته من العالم, that subsist on their own, إما مركب, they are either murakkab meaning compound, min juz'aini fasa'idan indana. So when comes to substance, he says substance are divided into two parts. You have murakkab, a compound and non-compound. What is the meaning? So if you look at this bottle, this is a compound substance. It is made up of many parts. So it is made up of atoms and molecules, correct or not? It is made up of atoms and molecules. So when something that is made up of something else, some other substances, smaller substances, it is called jism. So this is what he say, wa huwa al-jismu. So al-jism, it is compounded substance. Compounded substance, that are made up of parts, just like our bodies. For example, we are also a substance. We are al-a'yan. We are considered to be ayn. Correct or not? We are considered to be a substance, and we are a compounded substance. And why compounded? Because we are made up of parts and molecules. Whereas if it is not compounded, it's called jawhar. So there is a difference between jism and jawhar. Jism and jawhar. So jism is a substance that is compounded substance. Whereas jawhar is a non-compounded substance. But both is under the category of substances, al-a'yan. So if you can imagine, we have substances, al-a'yan, and then below it, compounded, non-compounded. So compounded is jism, non-compounded is jawhar. So this is the difference between jawhar and jism, and a'yan, the plural of ayn. So al-a'yan is the general term, and below it we have the jism and jawhar. So in books of Aqaid, when our scholar speaks about jawhar, when our scholar speaks about jism, what you call it, then we know the difference between the two. So here Al-Imam An-Nasafi speaks about these differences, and Al-Imam Tatazani, as usual, will explain further. So he said that what is accepted by the scholars of Kalam, when we say jism, it is enough, we say min juz'aini fasa'idan, even two parts. For example, you have two jawhar, or two molecules, for example, and it is combined, it becomes compounded, just by two substances, two jawhar, for example, it is still considered to be jism. So this is the minimum, he said, min juz'aini fasa'idan, so two and above. So it can be 1 million parts, and it can be 100,000 parts, or it can be two parts. So the minimum, it must be more than one. But if it is one, it's jawhar. But if it is more than one, then it is jism. So he mentioned wa indal ba'di, and then he mentioned some differences amongst the scholars of Kalam pertaining to the what you call it, definition of jism. Is it two and above or more than two? So he gave some opinions. So he said wa indal ba'di, and some of the scholars, they mentioned la budda min salasati ajza, three. Two not enough, there must be three. لتحقق تقاطع الأبعاد الثلاثة. So because of the three dimensions. Why three? Because in every body there must be length, width and depth. These are the three dimensions. تقاطع الأبعاد الثلاثة. So minimum must be three. It must have any a length, it must have any width, and there must be a depth. Then we say it is jism, a body. So you say أعني الطول والعرض والعمق. So the length, the width and the depth. وعند البعض من ثمانية أجزاء. Some scholars mention there must be eight parts in order for us to say it is a jism. Why? ليتحقق تقاطع الأبعاد على الزوايا قائمة. So they mention why 8, because when we have the length and you have the length, you have the width, you have the depth, then it must have the foundations. So when you have the foundations, so it becomes 8 in number. It becomes 8 in number. So imagine, for example, you have a substance, you have the length, you have the breadth, and you have the depth. You have the the length, the breadth and the depth. So now imagine like if you look like a cube, the length, the width and the depth. Whether we are looking at a squarish cube or a rectangular cube, then what we get from it is the 8 sides. So they mention there must be 8. وَلَيْسَ هَذَا نِزَاعًا لَفْظِيًّا رَاجِعًا إِلَى الْإِسْتِلَاءِ, and say this is not a differences based on the terminology within the knowledge of Aqeedah, but in reality this is a difference in the language. And when you say jism in the Arabic language, what does it mean? Does it mean that it can be compounded by only 2 parts, or it must be 3 and more, or it must be 8 and so on and so forth? So these are so many of the differences based on the language. So you say حتى يدفع بأن لكل أحد أن يصطلح على ما شاء بل هو نزاع في أن المعنى الذي وضع لفظ الجسم بإزائه هل يكفي فيه تركيب من جزئين أم لا. Why there are differences? And basically he's saying that when you say something that is jism, does combining of 2 parts make a body? This is the question. Or a body must consist of a length, breadth and depth, or a body must consist of all the 8 sides in order for us to call it a body. So because of these differences on how people understand a body in the language, that is why there are differences amongst the scholars. But again, this is not important. What is important a jism, when we say a body, it is basically something, a substance that comprises of different jawhar, different parts to it. So this is basically substances that are compounded. This is the first part basically he's saying. And then after that he mentioned the explanations of those differences, and this is not really important. And then Imam Nasafiyyah mentioned غَيْرُ مُرَكَّبْ كَالْجَوْهَرِ. So this is the second part. This is from the matan of Aqaid and Nasafiyyah. So the second part is if the substance is not compounded. So substance, non-compounded substances is what is meant by jawhar. So basically there are 2 things. Number one is jism. Number 2 is jawhar. So jism is something that consists of different parts of 2 and more, and this is the opinion that is chosen by the mutakallimin. Most of scholars of kalam mention 2 is enough for us to consider that it is a jism, that it is a body. But if it is one, it is jawhar. So before that, he mentioned some other things. What is the evidence of the first opinion? So he say احتج الأولون بأنه يقال لأحد الجسمين إذا زيد عليه جزء واحد أنه جسم من الآخر فلولا أن مجرد تركيب كاف في الجسمية لما صار بمجرد زيادة الجزء أزيد في الجسمية وفيه نظرا لأن أفعل من الجسامة بمعنى الضخامة وعظم المقدار يقال جسم الشيء. So all this he mentioned in the Arabic language. In the Arabic language, when you use the word jism, what does it mean? Because part of the meaning of the Arabic language is something that is big. When we say something jism, you say ay a'zam. يقال جسم الشيء أي أعظم فهو جسيم وجسام جسام بالضم. So someone who is big, we call in Arabic language, we say this is jasim, or this is a person who is jusam. والكلام في الجسم الذي هو اسم لا صفة. So it is any part of the nouns, and basically in the Arabic language, when you say something that is jism, it is something that consists of parts. So this is basically some explanations on the Arabic language. And before we go on to Jawhar, inshallah ta'ala, we stop here, and next week inshallah we will continue. I will touch on this again as a revision as usual in the beginning of the class, and then after that inshallah next week we will go on to speak on Jawhar and so many of the evidences and explanations on it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with tawfiq. And there is a possibility inshallah I think most probably next week we will go back into the masjid. We will have our class in the masjid. I will confirm again in the WhatsApp group. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina adhaban nar. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.